isolated in Libya. Well, these are the areas reported to be under control now of anti-government forces. In the middle of it all, the capital, Tripoli, increasingly a lonely outpost for Gaddafi. We're also getting reports the country's second most important military base has fallen to the protesters. Private jets and civilian aircraft at the Al Banin military airport were seen grounded. Military personnel say they've joined the People's Revolution. Well, if true, the takeover would be a major blow to Gaddafi's regime. With more on the opposition's growing area of control, Jackie Rowland now from Benghazi.
The town of AlJazeera lies just 50 kilometers to the west of Tripoli. Now it has become a new front line in the battle between pro and anti-Gaddafi forces. These pictures were shot by journalists brought here by the regime. The idea was to show the outside world that Gaddafi is still in control here. Instead, the reporters found that AlJazeera was in rebel hands, at least for now. The town is surrounded by pro-Gaddafi forces. Both sides are armed with tanks and anti-aircraft guns. Gaddafi's crackdown against his opponents has been the bloodiest and most ruthless in the wave of uprisings sweeping North Africa and the Middle East. But it doesn't seem to have stemmed the rebellion against his 4-decade rule. In the east of the country, opposition forces are welcoming visitors to what they are calling Free Libya. In the city of Benghazi, there are signs of a return to normal. Banks have reopened here and in the town of Al-Baida, both of which threw off Gaddafi's rule about a week ago.
The banks have been closed for 8 days, but thanks to our brave young men, they've managed to reopen in an orderly fashion. And praise be to God, everything is moving along smoothly.
And while residents stock up at the supermarket, the power vacuum that was left in the city is being filled. Local committees that are running towns and cities in the east of Libya have rallied behind a new leader, the former justice minister who resigned over the brutal repression.
What is happening in Libya is a popular revolution led by the youth, supported by the people against oppression and against a dictator who has led Libya with a singular point of view and with a vengeful attitude and bloodthirsty soul. Now we announce to the world that we intend to build a democratic nation with institutions that respect international obligations and treaties.
Libya relies on its oil fields. They're the mainstay of its economy. But now production appears to be grinding to a halt. This refinery is pumping 11,000 barrels a day, only 1/10 of what it would normally produce, according to the manager. The expatriate workers who used to man the plant have fled to escape the violence. Muammar Gaddafi's options are shrinking. Opposition forces continue to advance towards the capital, and the international community has imposed sanctions which further limit his room for manoeuvre. But the Libyan leader still shows no sign of being in the mood to surrender. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Benghazi.
Well, the Libyan leader still has some support. Just outside the capital, Gaddafi loyalists took to the streets, waving posters and chanting slogans. Well, outside the city of AlJazeera in western Libya, there were similar scenes. The city centre is in anti-government hands. Well, the protesters say pro-Gaddafi forces are preparing to launch a counter-offensive against them. Well, we have some amateur footage allegedly of Saif al-Islam. That's one of Gaddafi's sons rallying his supporters in Libya. It's unclear when and where these pictures were taken. But in it, Saif al-Islam tells the people that, quote, enemy forces are spreading rumours that the security forces weren't joining the protesters and that weapons would be provided to people ready to fight for Libya. Well, let's take a look at the main players in Gaddafi's inner sanctum now. We've heard a lot from the leader and his son Saif, but it's no coincidence that the two closest men to Gaddafi are also the leader's flesh and blood. His third son, Saadi, is commander of Libya's special forces. And well, he's been in charge of some of those crackdowns on demonstrators. Son number 4, Mu'tasim al-Qaddafi. He has a reputation as a bit of a playboy, but in his position as national security advisor, his influence over the Libyan military, others of the inner circle, may not remain so loyal. Abu Bakr Yunus Jabir is the defense minister, but hasn't been seen or heard of since the uprising began. Well, that's leading to rumours he's already resigned or maybe even under house arrest. Also among possible defectors, Colonel Abdullah Sanusi, he's Gaddafi's brother-in-law and the director of military intelligence. But the man who could deal the death blow is Moussa Koussa. He's the foreign affairs minister and a former head of external intelligence. Koussa is conspicuous by his absence from the list of senior Libyans under a travel ban. Oh, so that is Gaddafi's inner circle, but they're becoming more and more isolated. The US Secretary of State says her government is ready to aid the opposition in Libya. Well, for more on this, let's cross over to Jane Dutton in Washington, D.C. Jane.
That's correct, she did, Sammy. Hillary Clinton said she'd been in touch with Libyans who are attempting to organize themselves in the east of the country, which, as you know, is now in the hands of anti-government protesters. A little over an hour ago, she landed in Geneva, where she said to meet with other foreign ministers about Libya and to address the Human Rights Council. Meanwhile, two senior US senators, Republican John McCain and Independent Joe Lieberman, have been calling for a stronger response from the Obama administration. The politicians made the comments during a visit to Liberation Square, the main site of Egypt's revolution. AlJazeera's John Terrett has more on the US response to Libya.
Nightfall in the United States, and the emphasis on Libya now moves to Europe, where US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is attending a series of meetings on Monday at the United Nations Human Rights Council. Earlier, the Secretary of State had said that the US is reaching out to many Libyans, particularly in the east of the country, as the revolution appears to move west closer to Tripoli. She also revealed to journalists traveling on her plane to Geneva that the US is offering any kind of assistance to Libyans who might wish to consider overthrowing Colonel Gaddafi and his family. This is a ramping up of pressure on the Gaddafi family, and it comes now that the State Department is confident that most Americans who want to leave have left the country. That happened with the docking of the catamaran ferry in the port of Valletta in Malta the back end of last week. Prior to that, they were very nervous about how many Americans were still trapped inside Libya. And that is why we've also heard from two leading senators, John McCain, a Republican, and Joe Lieberman, a hawkish independent, speaking in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, and calling for the immediate imposition of a no-fly zone over Libya, also calling for the White House to recognize the provisional government, which is clearly getting underway in Benghazi. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has also said that the US supports the aspirations and rights of the people of Libya, who she says are sending a very clear message that it's time for Colonel Gaddafi and his family to go.
Well, retired US Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson was the Chief of Staff to former US Secretary of State Colin Powell. He told my colleague Nick Clark that the Obama administration's priority was to evacuate US citizens from Libya before taking further action.
You have to get your citizens out before you make anything really dramatic. That's just the way we do things. You don't want your citizens captured. You don't want them taken hostages and so forth. So while some might say, well, he dithered, I'd say he handled the situation rather well, moving up, ratcheting up the pressure as he moved along. President Obama, I mean. What can we do? What can we do? We don't want to put U.S. troops on the ground. The moment they go on the ground, they got big red bullseyes on their back for every al-Qaeda or al-Qaeda-like individual in the Maghreb, Northern Africa, and the vicinity. But can we spur NATO or some other troops that might be suitable for this into going on the ground in Libya if that's necessary?
But Hillary Clinton
so.
actually says any kind of assistance. Any kind of assistance seems to be the whole gamut of possibilities and options.
Well, it does. I mean, it's like
not ruling anything out,
it's like saying no options off the table. I mean, it seems to be the diplomatic parlance of the day.
Okay. What about the view that the administration should throw its full weight behind this kind of nascent interim administration that's evolving in Benghazi?
Well, I think we have to kind of wait and see what, and I know that doesn't satisfy people who want action taken right away, but you've got to wait and see how things develop themselves. This is the same situation that I'd look at in other places like Yemen or Bahrain or Egypt or Tunisia. If the people take care of it themselves, even if it's a little bit bloody, it's better than an outside force or forces exerting their pressure on them and trying to force things into a mold that perhaps the people don't want anything to do with. The best way to bring democracy to any place is through the people who want that democracy.
All right, okay, hang on there for a second, Colonel Wilkerson, because I just want to bring the thoughts of those who are trying to turn up the heat a little. Speaking during a visit to Cairo on Sunday, the independent US Senator Joe Lieberman said the US must support the Libyan opposition in their struggle against Gaddafi. He said, quote, "We've got to recognize the opposition provisional government as a legitimate government of Libya, and that we ought to give that government certainly humanitarian assistance and military arms. So, Colonel Walker said Senator Lieberman's thinking that military arms should be supplied.
Frankly, I wouldn't pay too much attention to Senator Lieberman. I've taken him off my scale. His picture's not on my piano there. He's not a person I'd listen to with regard to national security. John McCain's another case, and I haven't heard anything significant from Senator McCain.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Point.
Hang on there, because we can hear that right now. Yeah, I'm going to give it to you right now. You can give a comment on that in a second. Yeah, the US Republican Senator John McCain said that further restrictions needed to be imposed against Libya by the United Nations Security Council. Have a listen to this.
We think that there should be a no-fly zone established over Tripoli in Libya, so that helicopters and airplanes will be stopped from massacring people. We think that there should be a provisional government set up in Libya that we would support with material assistance if necessary.
So what about this concept of a no-fly zone? Is that a route the president can go down?
It is a route. However, I haven't seen all that many reports on high-performance aircraft or even helicopters flying in a way that was...
Yeah, but isn't it more about preventing the possibility of that happening?
Well, you know, I would rather see others than us do it. I would rather see the Germans, the Italians, the French, or someone else do it than us. And again, we've got just too many military instruments deployed out in the world right now. We don't need any more.
Well, as part of the resolution passed on Saturday, the UN Security Council has asked the International Criminal Court to investigate alleged abuses in Libya. It marks the first instance where the US has voted in favor of referring a case to the Hague-based court, of which Washington is not a member. Now, the court has jurisdiction over 4 crimes: genocide, war crimes, crimes of aggression, and crimes against humanity. The court is currently investigating crimes alleged to have taken place in 5 countries: Uganda, Democratic Republic of Congo, the Central African Republic, Sudan's Darfur region, and Kenya. But while the court has issued arrest warrants against several individuals for alleged crimes in those countries, only a handful have been arrested or surrendered to the court. Those who have not appeared before the court include Joseph Kony, head of the Rebel Lords Resistance Army in Uganda, and Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who has denied allegations of war crimes. So how effective can the United Nations referral of Libya to the ICC really be? For more on this, I'm joined from Boston, Massachusetts, by Philip Elston. He's the former UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions. He's now a professor of law at New York University. With all that in mind, should Gaddafi and those closest to him be worried in any way?
Well, I think it's a very good development that the Security Council has decided to refer this case. I think it's excellent that all of the different permanent powers, the Chinese, the Russians, the United States, all joined together in insisting that Gaddafi and his colleagues ought to, in fact, be referred to the International Criminal Court.
Why is it a good thing?
I don't think... Well, first of all, this represents a very real, a very strong statement by the international community that they won't stand by and tolerate what they obviously consider to be crimes against humanity being committed. I think there is a very real chance that Gaddafi will actually end up having to come before the court. There's no sense, of course, that this is going to happen overnight. The International Criminal Court has so far moved all too slowly in a lot of cases, but the hope is that where you've got such a clear-cut referral, where the offences that have been committed are pretty straightforward, where it should be easy to gather information, the court might actually be able to move fairly quickly.
And is this
will be a big challenge.
Excuse me, jumping in. Is this any different to Sudan in the sense that he's losing support within the country and he doesn't have, for example, African Union support, which Omar al-Bashir does have?
That's right. This was made possible by a confluence of different events. Gaddafi obviously is not particularly popular politically. The circumstances surrounding these attacks on his own population are very clear-cut, well documented. The Arab League, the African Union, the UN Human Rights Council have all mandated investigations. They're all going to be seeking to gather information. That provides the sort of basis upon which the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court could really get moving and try to get a prosecution launched fairly rapidly.
Okay, what happens next? if you could give us a few details, and how do you expect him to be caught and those who've also been accused?